We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Tuesday and a busy Monday. The rest of the week is likely to get a little crazy. At some point today, they are going to vote on whether or not Jim Jordan will be made Speaker of the House. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. That's kind of a fucked up mess. He might get elected, he might not, whether he deserves it or not. Well, it goes without saying. He's not smart enough. He's not honest enough. He should not be Speaker of the House. But we know that doesn't have any bearing when it comes to the Republican Party. They don't have anybody that's legitimate, credible, smart, or decent. So there aren't a lot of good choices in the Republican Party. Like I say, we'll talk about that later. I've got a bunch of emails too. I always look forward to shows with emails. I like the fact that you have some input and you have questions, comments, whatever it is. A couple of things I want to talk about before we get into it, though. One is the story. You know, I told you the other day that when I was in Portland, Maine, I was having dinner with my wife, and a lovely woman named Samantha came up and said she recognized me, and that jacked me up pretty good. I'm really excited when I run into somebody who knows who I am and watches the TikToks or listens to the podcast. Well, I did a TikTok about that. I mentioned it. And then somebody in the comments said, you know what? I'm pretty sure I saw you at the Renaissance Fair in Minnesota. Now, I explained to them that's not possible. I haven't been to the Renaissance Fair in 30 years. At least, well, no, 36 years. It was 36 years this year. And the person asked me why. And I said, that's a long story. It's not really a long story, but it is a story nonetheless. So I'll tell you the story. You know, like a lot of states, every year during the fall, early fall, the Renaissance Fair comes. I know my granddaughter and her mom and her brother went out to the Renaissance Fair. They love it out there. Even my sons may have gone with their friends or whatever. But for my wife and I, we haven't gone in 36 years. I know that for a fact, and here is why. 36 years ago, when my wife was pregnant, my son was born in September, early September. So this must have been late August or early September, because she was pregnant. She was quite pregnant. And it was a little warm that day, but you know, we were young, didn't have a lot of money, had a kid coming, and we decided to go to the Renaissance Fair. And it was fine. It was fun. You get the turkey leg, the corn, whatever the fuck you get, and you're walking around. Okay. Now, in the Renaissance Fair, I'm not sure if it was just here in Minnesota or they toured with the Renaissance fairs around the country, but there were these two guys. I think they were thought of as jesters, and they were called Puke and Snot, and they'd walk around making fun of people. Okay. No big deal. I'm a little sarcastic, so I was just waiting for them to say some shit to me so I could say something back. Well, they never did. They never said anything to me, but they did say something to my wife. Now, keep in mind, my wife is right on the verge of having this baby, my oldest son, who is now 36. So that's how I know how long it's been. And she's walking around and she's quite pregnant, just trying to mind her own business and have a good time, the two of us. And so we're walking along. And now, mind you, she's put on enough weight and she's toward the end of her pregnancy where she took her wedding ring off because it was starting to get stuck. You know, her hands were puffy and she took the wedding ring off as opposed to getting it stuck on there. No big deal. We're walking around. Well, we see Puke and Snot coming toward us, and I'm thinking to myself, well, this should be fun. Let's hear what he's got or they've got to say. This should be entertaining. So they look at my wife in her state of pregnancy, and then they look to her hand and they realize she doesn't have a ring on, even though they know I'm with her. And of course, they decide to make fun of my wife. So they grab her hand and hold it up to show everybody she doesn't have a ring on. And they yell, "My ladies, my gentlemen, here is the town whore." Now, my wife is pregnant and she's very sensitive. She's sensitive anyway. And that mortified her. I have to say, now in front of her, I would never admit to this, but I was kind of laughing because it was kind of funny. But my wife did not think it was funny. She did not think it was funny at all. She was upset. And from that time, she refuses to ever go to the Renaissance Fair again. So I don't go to the Renaissance Fair, which I'm fine with. It's really not my thing. But my wife was mortified because they did that to her, even though, it wasn't true. She wasn't the town whore. She was married and was pregnant, but it was just a funny thing they wanted to do. And she didn't think that motherfucking bullshit was funny at all. The next thing I want to tell you, I did something that was kind of a knee-jerk reaction. And I was talking to my wife about it, and I told her what I did, and she said, "Yeah, that was dumb. You shouldn't have done that. That was just mean." So then I took it to TikTok and I said, "This is what I did. I'm curious what you think." And most people agreed with me. But I'd done a TikTok about what was it about? What was it about? It was about the hearing that Donald Trump had regarding the gag order. Okay. Judge Chutkan added a limited gag order, and I explained how he will probably violate that gag order. But I also talked about it because I think a lot of us thought that on the 16th yesterday, when they had this meeting, that there would be some kind of punishment for Donald Trump, some accountability. But instead, what happened was Jack Smith wanted further limitations on what he could talk about. Let me see. I think I got this right here. And that's what Judge Chutkan did. She extended the gag order, barring Trump from talking about prosecutors, possible witnesses, judges, staff, and their families. So they took away a lot more that he couldn't talk about. He could still talk about this being a political process and complaining about the DOJ, but they specifically said you can't talk about these things. And as I said, we were kind of disappointed by that. I was disappointed because I thought something was going to happen. But after listening to a lot of people, I realized that this is a process. This is a drawn out process that the legal process has to go through, especially with the former president. And so basically what this judge was doing is setting up the final stages, kind of setting up Donald Trump, knowing that he would violate this action. And when he does, then she would be forced to do something. Anyway, on the TikTok, in the comments, a lot of people said, yeah, they're going to get him. It's a matter of time. Justice moves slow. But one guy came on and he said, Mike, I normally agree with you. On this one, I disagree. I believe Donald Trump is going to get off scot-free. And I got to be honest, when I read that, it kind of triggered me. I have to be honest, too. I don't get to read as many of the comments as you would think. There are a lot of comments when I do a lot of TikToks, and it's impossible to go through every one. At least nowadays it is. But anyway, I saw this one and it kind of triggered me. And I immediately thought to myself, I'm blocking that motherfucker, which I did do. And I have to explain to you why. First of all, when somebody says to me, I normally agree with you, or I love Joe Biden, or I hate Donald Trump, but I disagree with you now, that's usually what one of these covert Trumplafucks do. They're trying to sneak in the back door and try to set me up. Now, that may or may not have been the case in this situation, but it just gave me that feeling. But that isn't why I blocked him. It's the next part of what he said. He said, I disagree with you because I believe Donald Trump will get off scot-free. Now, I think you all know that people can disagree with me. I don't care about that. In fact, I think it makes it more interesting. I might kid with you about it, but I don't take offense to it. I've been married 40 years. I've got a lot of people contradicting the things I say. I don't take it to heart. But this one pissed me off because of this. If you're trying to tell me that you still believe Donald Trump is going to get off scot-free, you're either fucking trying to play with me here or you're stupid. I mean, the fact of the matter is he has 91 felony charges, indictments in 4 separate jurisdictions. If you think having 91 felony charges against you is nothing, you're just not fucking paying attention. You're not paying attention. No way Donald Trump gets out of this scot-free, and you should know better. I explained on the TikTok that I did responding to this was that, listen, either you're just being a whiny little bitch or you're stupid. And to be perfectly honest, we don't need somebody like that on this team. And when I say the team, I mean people like us, the rational boomers, or whoever else is of a similar mind. I've heard that from the beginning. And apparently, no matter what happens, they'll still say he'll get off scot-free. Well, that's not going to happen. I mean, imagine this. If you had a football team, I played football when I was younger. If there was one guy on the team that said prior to a game, oh, we're definitely losing this one. I don't even know why we're doing it. We're going to lose. That motherfucker would be kicked off the team because you don't need that kind of energy. The facts don't support what you're saying. And besides that, we don't need that energy. So it kind of pissed me off. And my wife tried to make me feel bad. Well, maybe he didn't mean that. I go, you know what? We're in a war right now. We're fighting against something and somebody who tried to destroy this country, an entire group. We don't need somebody whining and crying or saying, oh, he's never going to be accountable. He's already been accountable to a large extent. And if you don't believe that, try to imagine yourself with 91 felony charges and waiting to go on trial with that. You don't think that's something? That's a fucking lot. That's a lot more than when we started this whole process. People say nothing will happen. He won't be accountable. And I kept saying, yeah, you will. Just give it time. And here we are. But if even now you say that, I have to question your veracity. I have to question what team you're on. I mean, that's what Republicans do on my TikToks all the time. They won't necessarily identify themselves as Trumplafucks, but they'll say things, oh, nothing's ever going to happen with Donald Trump. Donald Trump will do this. Donald Trump will do that. And they're just covert Trumplafucks. And when it comes to my platform with TikTok or even on the podcast here, because I'm getting somebody, I've never had this before, but I'm getting a couple people leaving messages on the podcast page that say some negative things or just make some snarky comments. And it's always favoring Donald Trump. I block that motherfucker too. But here's the thing, when you have a platform, whether it be TikTok or the podcast, and we have people like these Trumplafucks, what they do is they go after people, they try to bait them, and then when they take the bait, then they scream and yell that they're being hurt and play the victim, and they take your shit down. I'm not even going to fuck with that. Those people aren't worth talking to, and I'm going to block them. Anyway, I told you that. Let's get to some emails. So I blocked the guy. My wife thinks I'm being mean. I think it was the right choice. I'm curious as to what you think, but it doesn't matter because I did it. And you know why I did it? You know why I did it, because it's my fucking show. Anyway, I hear people repeat that to me, and I get the impression that people think I'm just being arrogant and an asshole when I say that. Maybe partly, but mostly it's a joke, okay? It's a fucking joke. Anyway, let's get to the emails. Hi, Mike. I heard today that there are several vacant House seats, and it brings the number that Republicans need down to 216 or 217. While that does help their chances of electing a speaker, it also could mean that it would take fewer defections to elect, say, Hakeem Jeffries. I know it's a long shot, but other than possibly going with Liz Cheney or going back to Kevin McCarthy, I don't know who else gets the votes. I don't know who held the vacant seats, but it is at least possible that the Democrats pick up a seat or two and narrow the Republicans' control. With the superseding charges against George Santos, the Republicans might be left with no choice but to hold a vote to remove him. There was also talk about doing the same to Matt Gaetz. I know it is a rumor, but there's also talk that Kevin McCarthy could resign. That could be up to 5 seats that could be up for grabs this session. I'd hate to get my hopes up, but wouldn't that be amazing if we could flip the House mid-session? If something like that were to happen, it would give Democrats plenty of momentum going for 2024. First things first, though, you have to get a speaker. From there, we need to get working aid for Israel and Ukraine. I'm slightly concerned that if the situation in Israel isn't resolved quickly, that it could be dragged in, that we could be dragged in, and then who knows what could happen. I wouldn't be surprised if, because of Dirty Diaper Donnie's acts of espionage and treason, that Hamas knew how the weaknesses of Israelis' defenses worked. If he did and it comes out, I wouldn't want to be him. He already pissed off Israel by not returning those relics when he was a president. I wonder how they reacted to that news. Thanks, Eric. I want to say something. I think I talked about it on the podcast yesterday. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I just figured it out yesterday after the podcast. But anyway, the idea that 5 Republicans would defect to the Democrats and elect Hakeem Jeffries. I really don't see that happening. It's not likely it's going to happen, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen in order for Hakeem Jeffries to be elected. Now, I'll just say up front, I'm not expecting that to happen, but here's a scenario that I've heard people talk about, and it actually makes some sense. Now, Jim Jordan, 2 days ago, this is where I have a problem with the media. They were saying that at least 20 Republicans are going to block Jim Jordan. So there's no way he's going to be Speaker of the House. Then yesterday, they changed their tune because Jim Jordan is apparently whipping the votes and trying to get people on their side, promising them everything and anything to vote for him. Now, the talk was that he got 3 important people in the Republican Party to switch from voting against him to voting for him. And then when you listen to the media, what they would say is, Jim Jordan's on the verge, on the brink of being the Speaker of the House. See what they're doing there? 1 minute they're saying no way, and now with a switch over of 3 representatives, maybe more than that now, that he has a chance. And if we're talking about credibility and integrity, there's no way he has a chance. The unfortunate thing is credibility and integrity is hard to find in the Republican Party. Now, Jim Jordan's trying to game the situation because instead of voting on this behind closed doors with anonymous votes, he's decided instead to vote today in public on the House floor. Now, the reason he's doing that is he's trying to coerce or intimidate Republicans who might vote against him to vote for him because they're afraid of being primaried or MAGA going after them or Donald Trump posting a mean Truth Social, whatever the fuck. So it's conceivable he could get elected because the Republicans have always bowed to MAGA up to this point. As much as they want to separate themselves from MAGA, they've always bowed to them at this point. But here's something else to consider. A lot of these people that are being coerced that don't like Jim Jordan don't like the idea of being put in this position. Because as much as they might get heat from MAGA for voting against Jim Jordan, their constituents might be a little pissed off about them voting for him, especially since some of these folks are in districts where Joe Biden won. So what could happen is that a bunch of these people, a bunch of these Republican reps could say, fuck it, I'm not even showing up. And if they don't show up, then that drops the threshold even further. Let's say 10 Republicans say, we're not showing up. Then what happens is the threshold is now around 212, which is still going to be hard for the Republicans to get that number of votes for Jim Jordan. But more importantly, the interesting thing is the Democrats have 212 votes. So theoretically, if they all vote for Hakeem Jeffries and the Republicans split their vote, Hakeem Jeffries could win without a single Republican vote. Now, a lot of things have to happen for this to occur, and I don't honestly believe it will. I've always said I don't think Jim Jordan can get the votes. I didn't count on this coercion and this blackmail that they're doing. I don't know if it'll work. In my head, if the world is a good place, then he won't be elected and they'll have to do something else, presumably work with the Democrats. But again, when you're talking about Republicans, they don't have a lot of integrity. So instead of voting their conscience, they'll vote whatever they think is going to save their ass in upcoming elections and in fundraising. We have to wait and see what happens. And actually, if they have the vote for Jim Jordan, it may take more than one vote. Maybe it takes 15 votes. Maybe he doesn't get elected at all. We don't know. But as you're listening to this podcast, it's either just before the vote or the votes, and we kind of know what's going on. It's going to be interesting. Of course, we'll talk about it on TikTok, and I'll talk about it on the podcast tomorrow. So we'll see. The next email. Good morning, Mike. A few thoughts on the war with Hamas and Israel. Churches all over the nation are taking deliberate time for prayer in support of Israel and the escalating war with Hamas. Just a note for our consideration specific to moments of prayer for Israel. 100% agree with biblical principles about prayer. Support of Israel and Christians' greater commitment to meaningful Christ-like influence on the world around us. But I wonder if our effort to pray for Israel and peace was sufficient. I think about a common sentiment of many churches today. The church is not a building. The church is the people, or something similar. Of the same flavor, it's important to remember that Israel is not a location. Israel is a people. As long as we're speaking of Israel, God's chosen people, otherwise we're speaking of the nation of Israel. Is there a distinction? Should there be a distinction? Goddamn, I don't know. I don't know. You're obviously a smarter person than I am. As I've said, I don't know much about this conflict. I just know it's been going on for decades. The email goes on. Israel has certainly had thousands of years of reaping blessings, favors from God, as much as Israel has suffered punishment, discipline from God. And that's the quandary. Are our prayers for Israel in line with God's principles, given Israel's well-documented missteps? Meaning, are our prayers in vain if Israel is being disciplined by God for her period ungodly practices? Of course, there is no harm in praying for Israel, even if they're being punished. But what about the non-combative victims? Should we also pray for them? Is it wrong to pray for both in the same prayer? How would God view our multi-focused prayers? Is it even possible to pray for everything and everyone? I considered the number of times God imposed punishment and even death on Israel, and I struggle to evaluate what is punishment from the Lord versus what is another unwarranted or warranted attack on Israel. I also considered God's command to support Israel, but knowing Israel's behavior may come with consequences, discipline, punishment. I remember both things can be true. Yes, this new chapter in this 1,000-year-old conflict is escalating scripture teaches us there will always be conflict between Israel and the nation's people who don't recognize God. Prayers, Christ-like posturing, and evaluating historical prophetic past seem to be in order for all of us. In addition to supporting Israel, we must also adhere to God's commandments, the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, which begs consideration for the innocent on both sides of the conflict. There are victims on both sides who have been violently removed from their homes and territories, victims who have had their human national rights violated by both sides, and victims from both sides intentional and illegal violating international and national treaties. To believe in one true God and support ungodly behavior cannot coexist without consideration of victims and consequences for ungodly behavior. I say all that to make a point that I no longer just arbitrarily fall on the side of Israel, given biblical history measured against more recent historical events the last 120 years. I also consider that not even God's chosen people can embrace sinful behavior, commit atrocities, or abuse human life without consequences. It is my personal belief that God's chosen people, Israel, is not necessarily the nation of Israel we see on ever-changing maps or what we understand Israel is today. Biblically, Israel is a people without borders and without barriers. They do not require national or international treaties, nor should they get unfettered support and allegiance from Christians if Israel fails to properly uphold their obligations and responsibilities to the Lord. As God's chosen people, godly behavior is required, or there may be consequences. Finally, enemies of Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, extremist groups, etc., should also suffer consequences and be held accountable for their atrocities. We have learned and relearned time and time again through human history, when one side of a conflict dehumanizes another side of the conflict, the same will always be reciprocated. For me, neither the initial dehumanization acts or the reciprocated acts are justified. Both sides have participated in appalling dehumanizing behavior, cutting off life support, water, electricity, damaging, poisoning wells, restricting health care, enforcing unbalanced legal judicial systems, failing to provide equal government representation, restricting trade, employment, and economic growth, stealing land and territory, killing and arresting innocent civilians and non-combatives. This evolving legacy is far from godly for either side of the conflict. Now, remember, it's only been 100 years, 100 plus years ago that the Ottoman Empire failed and the British colonialism divided up the region, which inflamed the four primary groups already living in the region. It's only been 80 plus years ago that the UN created an Israeli state in the region under the same diverse measures. The very next day, four Arab nations attacked Israel for being left without a say in the matter. It's only been 50 years ago Israel became a force to be reckoned with in the region by even more of the same divisive measures. For three modern-day generations, Arab and Israeli tensions have been outrageous. Both sides claim retaliation. Both sides continue violence and atrocities. Then the world divided itself and picked sides. And in order to remain loyal to beliefs, we applied and continue to apply an unbalanced and unjust application of our version of justice to this troubled region for the same atrocities without explanation for the disparities in our justice, all the while never considering whether or not God is disciplining Israel. Some of us believe Israel is innocent and are the victims. Other of us believe that Palestinians are innocent and are the victims. Christ teaches us it's simple as valuing human life, love your neighbor, be kind, have equal justice, give weight to human decency. But until both sides develop equal tolerance for each other, this will never be solved. One might say we contribute to the problem when we pick a side, especially when both sides are the problem. Excuse me. It's a fucking mouthful. To pray or not to pray for Israel? That is the question. And that is signed by KCT. It's KCT. KCT writes some lengthy and deep emails, and I appreciate them. It is food for thought. And what's explained in that email explains why so many of us in America are confused by what's going on. There's more to it than this side's better and that side's worse, or vice versa. Both sides have their issues. But again, as an old white guy in America, it's really not mine to decide, not mine to pick sides. Why does the American government pick Israel over the Palestinians? Probably because they have the most firepower, the most money, people of the Jewish faith in this country. But then there's a wild card that comes in too. You have Israelis and you have Palestinians. That would be one thing. But you throw into the mix Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, and therein lies the real problem why we are looking at so much violence in that area. Again, there are smarter people than I. KCT may be one of them that can sort this out. But people have been trying to sort it out for decades, and I'm just not smart enough to come up with a way to figure that out. Nobody seems to have been able to do that. All right, the next email says, "Hey, Boomer. Okay, a couple of weeks ago, before Hamas and Israel, I mentioned in an email my concern for the international coalition that was building and understood, like any thinking person does, that another Trump term effectively ends the U.S. as a superpower. As I recall, you semi-incredulously responded that that's what you're worried about. Well, in the words of the great Samuel Jackson in the apartment scene in Pulp Fiction, and I'll appreciate if you say it like he would, oh well, then allow me to retort. You're fucking A right. That's what I'm worried about. Shit, just like this plus screwing with oil until gas is $7 a gallon, and a domestic terrorist event or two. Sorry, I didn't do a good Samuel Jackson. I'm a little slow today. A scary thing about the 2020 election is that if it was up to suburban white women, we'd be currently enjoying Trump's next and permanent term. Frankly, black women saved our ragged white asses in the swing states. Trump's only I can stop WW3 message will play like a Stradivarius with that crew. Okay, keep it up, Boomer. You the man. Best, Garage Door Jeff. P.S. Great classic Boomer quote in the Howard episode. So, Howard, you're a criminal, right? Howard and I have an understanding. He does have a criminal background. He did spend some time in lockdown, and he's more than willing to talk about it. So, yeah, I said that. And I didn't feel worried that he'd be hurt by that because he's so open about that part of his life. Frankly, he's a different man now, but it was still something that occurred. And I think it's important we say that because he has some perspectives that 99.99% of us don't have. All right, the next email. Mike, I'm writing after you read and responded to my recent email on the podcast. You stated that many of the boomers who grew older and moved to the right politically and economically speaking was because these people could rationalize their changed opinions while working to make a lot of money and forego their old hippie ways or something like that. Yeah, that's kind of what I said. I agree with that for some people's move to the right. What I really believe is that the Powell memo that was sent to many ultra-rich people and to the American Chamber of Commerce in 1971 did more damage to the left. If you or others are not aware of the Powell memo, I am not. I recommend that people research it and read this relatively brief memo. In short, the Powell memo became the blueprint for the rise of American conservative movement and the formation of a network of influential right-wing think tanks and lobbying organizations such as the Heritage Foundation and the American Legislative Exchange Council. It caused very rich people to donate money to change people's views. It was a very effective form of propaganda that helped change many people's thoughts and opinions about politics and the value of our safety net programs. I believe that if this nation is going to move back to the left of center, this information must become more publicly known and understood. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for indulging me. Well, I'll take a look at it. I don't know anything about it, but I'll check it out and we can talk about it here. Next email. Hi, Mike. I have a couple of 3 questions for you. A while back, Elon kind of declared that he had handpicked Ron the Satan to be the next president of the United States. However, it didn't take long after that declaration for Ron the Satan's campaign to collapse in hell. I could never figure out why all of a sudden things got fucked up for him. Some said it was because he fucked with the orange guy. Others blamed Disney, the challenge there, and also harassment of the migrant workers in Florida, which resulted in wealthy Republicans losing tens of millions of dollars due to migrant workers fleeing Florida. Do you have any ideas why things went so quickly to hell for Ron the Satan? The second, yeah, I do. I think all the things you've said are part of it, but I also think that he is a poor candidate. He's weird, he's socially awkward, and when people finally took a look at him and listened to him, they kind of creeped them out. I mean, if you're going to be a presidential candidate, you better be able to appeal to people, and he is not an appealing guy. You throw in the fact that he put a 6-week ban on abortion. That is probably the single most important policy to the defeat of the Republicans in 2022 and in 2024. He's all on board with overturning Roe v. Wade, and it's a bad choice. So that was part of it. Then you have the gun control situation. You have the shootings in Florida, and all he does is loosen things up for the guns. Put it this way, everything that Ron DeSantis did is working against him. He's a bad candidate. He's a bad guy, and he is not going to be the nominee. The second question is this. Do you think Matt Fake is finished after he was able to successfully overthrow Kevin McCarthy's kingdom and totally messing things up in the House? The motherfucker is still all over the TVs. Yeah, I think he's pretty much done. He's got a rich daddy. He'll probably land on his feet doing something else. He was already trying to audition for some of the right-wing television shows, and that may be where he ends up. I don't think his future is in the House of Representatives, and I don't think he's going to get a better job. He's not going to get a promotion. I think he'll be around. He's a loudmouth, slimy piece of shit, so he would be a prime candidate for Fox or OAN or Newsmax. The third question takes a 180-degree turn from the above. When is it that Ed is going to show up on more regular basis like before? For me, he is the most favorite guest, and I really miss him presence in your show. Thanks very much for your time, my friend, Joe. Well, Joe, here's the deal. In spite of the fact that he's retired, he has limited time. I don't know what the fuck he's doing. I don't. I would love to have him on more. And maybe I will down the road a little bit. I try to have him on once a week. That doesn't always work out if I'm out of town or something like that. But I'm cognizant of Ed's value on the show, and I appreciate it. And I respect what Ed has to say. I will always try to get Ed on more all the time, trying to get him on more, but I can only do what I can do. And if I can get him on once a week, that may be the most I can expect to get out of him. He's an older guy, man. He's not a fiery young guy like me. But no, I get your point. I like having Ed on the show too. It makes doing the show way fucking easier, and as well as it does with all the listener guests as well. But I can appreciate what you're saying about Ed. I'll talk to him and see if I can get him on more. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. The last email comes from Darren from Montana. And of course, he was on the show at one point. He says, "Hey, Boomer, love the podcast today. Just got done watching John Oliver's monologue from Sunday. He said it so well. No matter who you feel is correct in the awful mess in Israel and Gaza Strip, many innocent people are dying needlessly. If you're a fan of John, it's worth the watch. These poor people are being used as pawns. Humanity at its worst. Thanks for your great content and wisdom, Darren from Montana." Yeah, I talked about that before on TikTok and maybe here on the podcast. But that's the fact here. What's going on here with Israel and Hamas and the Gaza Strip and all this stuff, we have to remember this. These wars, these attacks are all precipitated by the government, by old people, men and women. It's about ego. It's about power. It's about money. The unfortunate thing about this is those people don't pay the price. It's a bunch of innocent people, women, children, families, those sorts of things. They are the collateral damage of these egomaniacal folks that decide they want to fight. And that is truly the saddest part of this thing. You've got people in Palestine who aren't really represented by Hamas, but when Israel decides to invade the Gaza Strip, should that happen, they're the ones that are going to pay the price. Now, Israel says they want to wipe out Hamas, and I'm all for it. They are a terrorist organization. They should be wiped off the planet. However, in the process of doing something like that, they're going to kill a lot of innocent people. And there's where I have the problem. You don't piss off Israel because they don't fuck around. They are going to do everything they can to wipe Hamas off the planet. As I say, the unfortunate thing, there's going to be a lot of innocent people. And whether it be Israel or Hamas, they should take that into consideration. But you know what? They don't. They don't take that into consideration at all. And we should think about that. Maybe Israel, being led by Netanyahu, who is basically an Israeli Donald Trump. Maybe we need to get the young people coming into the fold and taking control of not only this country, but some other countries. Maybe things will go better. I don't know for sure, but that's the only thing I can hope for at this point. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. So yesterday, we know that Judge Tanya Chutkan in Washington, D.C., overseeing the January 6th insurrection case, had a little shindig, a little get-together. And in this get-together, Jack Smith and his team showed up. Donald Trump's legal team showed up. And they were talking about Donald Trump's loud fucking orange mouth, him saying things about the upcoming trial, him saying things about the DOJ, about Jack Smith, about Judge Chutkan. This old man can't keep his mouth shut. Now, the judge had warned him one time before, but he continued to do what he does. So when they had this get together, I presume something was going to go down. And something did. Jack Smith, after hearing some of the things that Donald Trump spewed, made a motion to make a more expanded but still limited gag order. And when the judge looked at it, she agreed. It's really interesting. The hearing didn't start out well for Donald Trump's team. First thing Donald Trump's team said was, well, you know, Judge, you did put on some restrictions when we first started, and seems like it's working out real well. I don't know why we need to change anything. And at that point, Judge Chutkan literally laughed in their face and said, yeah, no. And then she started to read off some of the diatribes that Donald Trump spewed since they last met. So she wasn't having it. She laughed in these people's face and nice try, but you fucking failed again. And then at one point, Donald Trump's lawyers tried to spew something that obviously came directly out of Donald Trump's mouth, in that Joe Biden was somehow trying to censor Donald Trump by virtue of Jack Smith and this judge. Now, this kind of pissed her off. She basically said, you know what? We're not dealing with any campaign rhetoric in this court case. And that pretty much shut him down. Now, Trump has been trying to use his presidential campaign as an excuse to attack witnesses. And the judge gave kind of a stern rebuke Monday from the federal courts. She said no other criminal defendant would be allowed to do so, and I'm not going to allow it in this case, said Tanya Chutkan. She imposed this order, this gag order, prohibiting the former president from attacking prosecution staff, court staff, and witnesses associated with the 4-count felony indictment. If Trump violates her order, she would consider sanctions as may be necessary, the judge told prosecutors and defense lawyers in her courtroom. Such sanctions could include admonishments, a stern talking to. No, I think we need to take it a little further than that. It could include fines, which obviously doesn't stop him, or even Trump's incarceration. There's one other thing she could do that she threatened to do: move up the case. It's now scheduled for March. What if she said, you know, you keep doing this, we got to wrap this up quicker. Now it's fucking February. That would be something she could do. Now, Chutkan's order applies to the case accusing Trump of conspiring to defraud the United States and block the January 6, 2021 ceremony to certify the election lost to President Joe Biden. Now, he's been separately been ordered by a New York State judge not to attack court personnel in the civil fraud case after he posted a photo of the judge's law clerk. Now, Trump's lawyer, John Lauro, spent most of his time during Monday's 2-hour hearing arguing that a gag order, even a limited one, would violate Trump's First Amendment right to free speech and his ability to campaign for his old job back. Now, it's amazing to me. He says we have to tolerate a bit of colorful, vituperative speech. I love that $9 word. I don't even know what the fuck that means, and I got a pretty good vocabulary. He said this during a discussion of Trump's attacks on former Attorney General Bill Barr, former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair Mark Milley, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, and others. Now, Lauro told Chutkan that any order even slightly limiting Trump's ability to disparage potential witnesses and prosecutors would hamper his ability to push a major theme of his campaign, that he is being targeted specifically to block his return to the White House. Lauro repeatedly launched into diatribes that the prosecution of Trump were evidence of tyranny and that Trump had no choice but to speak out. What does someone do in the face of oppression, he asked. Lauro even said that Trump's depiction of Washington, D.C. as a crime-ridden, rat-infested place was appropriate because it was true. Certainly, Mr. Trump is going to change that in 2024 and take the rats off the street, Lauro said. Now, Chutkan, who herself has been a frequent target of Trump in public remarks on social media, frequently had trouble hiding her astonishment at Laura's assertions. She said, "I don't need to hear any campaign rhetoric. Obviously, you have an audience other than me in mind," she said at another. When Laura occasionally argued that the only way Trump could get a fair trial would be to postpone it until after the election, Chutkan reminded him of her previous rejection of that request. This trial will not yield to an election cycle. And when Laura argued that no new censorship was needed because Trump was abiding by her initial terms of pre-trial release that included language that he not engage in witness intimidation, this is where Chutkan literally laughed out loud. Prosecutors from Special Counsel Jack Smith's office had wanted Chutkan to prohibit Trump from attacking the District of Columbia and its residents who will make up the coming jury pool, along with President Joe Biden's administration generally and the Department of Justice specifically. They also requested he be banned from attacking court and prosecution staff and witnesses. Trump calling the Justice Department the Department of Injustice and claiming that Biden had ordered the prosecution would taint the jury pool. They added that Trump's attacks on high-profile witnesses also have the effect of intimidating lesser-known witnesses. If you come after the defendant, he will come after you, she said. Chutkan, though, said that such a broad order was inappropriate and that any potential tainting of potential jurors could be weeded out during jury selection. But she said she would not allow Trump to endanger either prosecutors or courtroom staff for simply doing their jobs. She said, "I will not permit it here simply because he's running a political campaign." Trump's campaign responded to the ruling in a statement attributed to a spokesman. "Today's decision is an absolute abomination and another partisan knife stuck in the heart of our democracy by crooked Joe Biden, who was granted the right to muzzle his political opponent, the leading candidate for the presidency in 2024. And the most popular political leader in America, President Donald J. Trump, President Trump will continue to fight for our Constitution, the American people's right to support him and to keep our country free of change, of weaponized and targeted law enforcement." They love to talk about the First Amendment. Now, the fact is, with the First Amendment, of course, you have the right to say whatever you want, but there are occasions when there are consequences for what you say, especially when what you say is inflammatory or a flat out lie or inciting violence, which is exactly what Donald Trump is attempting to do. When he talks ill of a judge or a juror or a witness, it's a signal for his dumbass Trumplafucks to take action. Now, fortunately, Donald Trump's power has weakened quite a bit since January 6th. We aren't getting big crowds of people showing up and attacking buildings. They don't have the courage for that anymore. They saw 1,000 of their buddies get prosecuted and convicted, many in jail, and they think if they come out, it's a trick. But that's not going to stop the individual crazy for doing stupid, fucking ridiculous stuff. Like we recently had this situation a couple of days ago where this crazy landlord goes to the door of a Muslim family, stabs a 6-year-old kid 27 times, stabs the mom and kills the kid, and then stabs the mom multiple times, but she lives. Now, I can't necessarily blame that one on Donald Trump. This is more about the Israeli-Hamas war. But this is what happens. You start spewing this shit, and it creates violence. And therein lies the line that you do not step over. You have the right to say whatever you want, but you may suffer consequences for it. I mean, if you're on the stand in court and you decide to lie to the court, are you held innocent because you have your First Amendment right? Well, according to Donald Trump and his thinking, that would make sense, but we know that's not true. There are many things you can say, but many things you can't say, and many circumstances when you shouldn't say things. Just because he doesn't get to say everything doesn't mean it's infringing on his First Amendment right. That's just the fucking facts. Donald Trump knows this. His lawyers know it all too well, but his lawyers are bending to Donald Trump's every word. And they are embarrassing themselves when they do that. So why they continue to do that, I have no fucking clue. It makes no sense. But in the end, they're going to lose. All this vitriol, all this bullshit is not going to amount to anything. Donald Trump will lose his case, his civil case in New York. There's just too much evidence. Donald Trump will lose his case in Washington, D.C. There's too much evidence. He can say whatever he wants, but he can't discount the evidence. I mean, he can try, but it's not going to work. There's too much evidence in Georgia as well. He can yell and scream and rant all he wants, but it's not going to work. I've told you this about Donald Trump and people like Donald Trump. They get to a point where they're put in a corner. There is no way out. And that is where Donald Trump currently is. 91 felony charges. Does anybody really think he's going to run the table and not get convicted of at least one or two of those things? Well, that's just not possible. The odds are not with him in this situation. He can scream and rant and cry and threaten and do all this stuff, but it's all for naught, because it doesn't take much to put Donald Trump away for the rest of his life. And with all the things going on, he is going to get got. There ain't no question about it. He is going to get got. But he's just trying to do anything and everything right now. That's why so much of what he says seems absolutely ridiculous, because he's got nothing that he can scream about that has any legitimacy at all. So instead, Donald Trump is just saying fucking everything, anything he can. But it's not going to work. This is what I tell people all the time. And I've said this before on the podcast. We get people that will come to me or other people and say, oh, I'm really worried this is going to happen. I hear this is what's going to happen, whatever it may be. And I always ask them, where did you hear that? And it may be the news or it may be out of Donald Trump's mouth. And I always say to them, first of all, Donald Trump and all the Trump-la-fucks are pathological liars. They've been wrong over and over again. So why in the world would you believe that? Why would you let them instill fear in you just because of what they say, when you know they're always wrong? And if it comes from the media, the same thing can be said there. The media has a different agenda than what the media used to have. The media used to be someone that was just delivering the information and allowing you to make your decisions. That's not the case anymore. As I've said, I'm very frustrated by the media in this country. They will tell you one thing. First of all, they don't tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Very often, they omit things that you should know about the stories. And very often, they'll focus on those things that might make you nervous or scare you. And they do that for one reason, so that you continue to watch. None of that has anything to do with fucking journalism. Journalism is like Walter Cronkite, if you're old enough to remember. He sat there very stoically and gave the news. The only time you ever saw Walter Cronkite have any kind of emotion is the day that John F. Kennedy died. But beyond that, he just told you the facts. There was no leaning to either side. It was just the facts. We got to make our choice on what we believe based on our beliefs. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. Nowhere, no how, it doesn't exist. Everybody's got a slant, and everybody is trying to get people to think what they want them to think. And that's the problem in this country. That's what's caused the divisiveness in this country. Everybody you talk to has a different story because not all the facts have been given to you. Things have been omitted or things have been slanted a certain way. And if that's the only place you get your information, well, then you believe what you fucking hear. And to you, that's fact. Unfortunately, not everything you get from our politicians or our media is fact. I dare say that the majority of what you hear from politicians, especially Republicans and our media, is not the complete fact. It may have some facts in it, but it won't have all the information, and it will certainly be slanted. So we have to be very careful where we get our information and how much credibility we put into that information. Frankly, there isn't much credibility in the shit we hear day to day. All right, today we know about this event that's going to happen. Representative Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio. He's not really a representative. He's more a shit stirrer. He's a bully. He's dumb, and he's a piece of shit. Now, he's projecting optimism heading into the planned vote on whether he'll become the next House Speaker today. Even as considerable doubt remained, he could lock up 217 Republican votes needed to win. As I say, when he was nominated, there were at least 60 Republicans that did not vote for him. We were also told that as many as 20 or more Republicans intended to block him. So Jim Jordan decided to game the situation and do it in public on the House floor and taking a roll call so everybody could be attributed to what their vote was. And Jim Jordan's idea is that if some Republicans voted against him, then MAGA would know about it, then Donald Trump would know about it. And these people might be concerned about being attacked either online or otherwise, and also being primary. So Jim Jordan thinks those people that would vote against him now will vote for him. If it was a normal situation with normal people with a little bit of integrity, I'd say you're being a fucking fool. But this is the Republican Party, so God knows what will fucking happen. Jim Jordan said, I felt good walking into the conference. I feel even better now. We've got a few more people we want to talk to, listen to, and then we'll have a vote tomorrow, Jordan told reporters after a lengthy House GOP meeting. Jordan won support Monday from some of his colleagues who were skeptical of his bid for the Speaker's gavel, but others publicly declared they were not won over yet. You know who Jim Jordan is. You know what he stands for. You know what he does. You know that he does nothing. Are you telling me you can be convinced? Well, of course they can be convinced, but it's not finally realizing that Jim Jordan is a good candidate. It's a matter of what they can get out of it from Jim Jordan if they put him in the Speaker's job. Jordan would only be able to lose 4 GOP votes if all House members vote, and Democrats, as expected, all vote for Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. Now, Representative Mike Rogers of Alabama, the influential chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, on Monday announced he's backing Ohio Republican Jim Jordan after previously expressing serious reservations. So Jim had a chance to talk to him and apparently offered something to him that he coveted. Rogers cited thoughtful conversations with Jordan about their shared view on passing defense funding and other appropriations to fund our government's vital functions. Since I was first elected to the House, I've always been a team player and supported what the majority of the Republican conference agrees. Representative Ken Calvert, another defense hawk, followed suit shortly after, and Representative Ann Wagner of Missouri, who last week told reporters she was a hell no on Jordan for a speaker and would absolutely not support him, flipped and now has endorsed him. Now, there's a couple of reasons why they may do this. First of all, as I said, Jim Jordan promised them something or lied or whatever. But there's another factor here you have to understand. The Republican Party looks really bad right now because they don't have a Speaker of the House and haven't had a Speaker of the House for at least a couple of weeks. They know they're in the shit. They've got to get a Speaker of the House. So while some of these Republicans may not like Jim Jordan, they may be thinking to themselves, we just got to get any Speaker of the House so we can get some things done and quit looking stupid. That may be part of the thinking. Now, if you listen to the media, 1 minute they tell you Jim Jordan doesn't have a chance, and now they act as if he's on the precipice of becoming Speaker of the House. So what do you believe? Apparently, the media doesn't know. They just say what comes out of their ass. But here's what I want to tell you. If it looks like Kevin McCarthy is going to win the speakership, watch the media start to cause worry and concern. Oh my God, what's going to happen if Jim Jordan becomes Speaker of the House? What's going to happen? Oh my God, Armageddon's coming. Here's what you need to understand about Jim Jordan. Kevin McCarthy was probably the weakest Speaker of the House in history. Jim Jordan's weaker than Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy was probably the dumbest Speaker of the House in the history of Speakers of the House. Jim Jordan is dumber than Kevin McCarthy. The other factor you have to consider is this crazy rule. This one person needs to ask for a vote of no confidence to vacate the position. That rule that hung over Kevin McCarthy's head will also be hanging over Jim Jordan's head. Now, you're probably going to say, well, that won't be a problem because MAGA will love him and they won't ask for a vote of no confidence. And that's probably true. However, the normies, as they call him, if he gets too outrageous and too crazy, they can just as easily call for a vote of no confidence. And they've got a much bigger contingent to get him the fuck out of there. And of course, the Democrats will vote to get his ass out of there should they be put in that position. The media will have you believe that Armageddon is imminent if Jim Jordan is the Speaker of the House. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not going to be good. It's not going to be a positive thing. He's going to try all kinds of things, but he's not going to have any more power than Kevin McCarthy. In fact, he may have less. Because Kevin McCarthy at least had the normal people backing him and MAGA was mad at him, and that's why he got kicked out. So if the opposite is true and Jim Jordan gets in and MAGA supports him and the normal people, at least that's what they call them, go against him, well, that's a much bigger contingent. He's not going to have any power. And the important thing to remember here is that even if he does become Speaker of the House, he's got a little over a year to do the fucking job. Because we know in 2024, the Democrats will take over the House. Jim Jordan will be back sitting in his seat with his rolled up sleeves doing nothing as he's known to do. Hakeem Jeffries will become the Speaker of the House when the Democrats take control. Now, as I said earlier in the podcast, the problem for Jim Jordan is that he's kind of going scorched earth. He's trying to play the bully as he is wont to do. He's going against these normal people that wouldn't normally vote for him and saying, listen, you better do this. We're going to dox you. We're going to get you primaried and all this stuff. He's literally threatening people that won't vote for him. And think about that for a moment. He's not threatening Democrats. He's threatening his own people. That is the essence of the Republican Party. This is who they are. They're divisive. They're unscrupulous and scurrilous, and they're the worst humans you could ever possibly see. And they're fighting amongst themselves. As much as it might be a fucked up mess in the House, the fact that they're fighting each other is a good thing. And it's going to make it that much easier for the Democrats to beat them in November of 2024. So if Jim Jordan does become the Speaker of the House, don't worry too much. He doesn't have any power any more than Kevin McCarthy has. And in fact, he's probably going to be weaker. And he's going to have his job hanging over his head, just like Kevin McCarthy. And he's going to get some pressure too. Now, there's one way we could alleviate the problem of Jim Jordan becoming Speaker of the House. And it's almost too late unless something happens today. But this would be a very opportune time for Jack Smith to issue his superseding indictments and indict sitting members of Congress, because Jim Jordan would be one of those folks. He was behind the insurrection. He helped plan the insurrection. He spoke to Donald Trump multiple times on January 6th. You give that man an indictment, that changes the whole picture altogether. The reasonable-minded Republicans could never vote for him if he were indicted. So if I had my wish, I would hope that Jack Smith comes out and said, oh, by the way, before you vote, Jim Jordan's indicted, Paul Gosar's indicted, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lowen Boebert, all these fucks are indicted. That would change the whole climate of everything. Now, I'm not expecting that to happen. It's going to happen at some point. It might be even more interesting if he does become Speaker of the House and then Jack Smith indicts him. A Speaker of the House gets indicted. That doesn't mean he's kicked out of his job, because we know how Republicans handle this shit, but it would sure taint his tenure. He would be forever remembered as this federally indicted, criminally charged Speaker of the House. I would love to see Jack Smith come up with that before the vote, or if not before the vote, after Jim Jordan may or may not be elected. To indict him after not being elected would add insult to injury. To indict him once he is Speaker of the House, that would even be fucking better, a lot better. Now, Representative Don Bacon, a Republican from Nebraska, a party moderate, said he intended to vote for former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, not Jordan. You can't, as American, you can't play a game where not everybody is playing by the rules, he said. Right now, about 90% of us, or 95%, play by the rules. I beg to differ. 5% don't, and they've been orchestrating this since January to get this to this point with Mr. Jordan. And I think it's unacceptable. Well, then do something about it. Don't keep bending to these motherfuckers. Representative Mario Diaz-Balart of Florida said he was unmoved since he said Friday that he was not going to vote for Jordan. And Representative Victoria Spartz of Indiana released a statement that appeared to say she would vote against Jordan on the House floor unless he proved he had 217 votes needed in a closed-door conference meeting, which he hasn't done. If Jim believes in freedom, not tyranny, he has to proceed with conference, not floor, deliberation, as he promised, she posted on social media. Some Republicans have also complained about pressure tactics from Jordan allies. Representatives from Fox News host Sean Hannity's show are reportedly emailing GOP holdouts and urging them to back Jordan's bid. That's right. Sean Hannity is getting in there and trying to leverage and coerce these people to do it. Because you know what will happen then? These people who vote against Jim Jordan will be all over Fox News. Now, a majority of Republicans voted to nominate Jordan as the party's speaker designate in an internal election on Friday. But that is only 155 out of 21. That's more than 60 people, 60 representatives that didn't vote for him. And that would make him fall short of 217. Now, Jim Jordan is trying to whip up these votes, trying to get these people to side with him. Maybe he's telling them, if we don't do this, we're going to look foolish. We need a Speaker of the House. So just fucking vote for me. I can see him saying that. Or, like I said, threatening these people with being primaried or being exposed or doxxed or whatever. This is the kind of filth that the Republican Party is. They will do anything and everything to Democrats and to themselves to get what they want. If you're a Republican and you're watching this, you should be concerned about this because it doesn't stop here. If they're successful, then it will continue and it will tear this country apart. You need to know that. And in spite of the fact that you may want a Republican to win and you want to own the libtards, you're fucking over this country in the process. And that means the people on the streets that vote for Republicans, and that means those Republicans in the House of Representatives that fucking know better. They know better. But maybe something's in it for them, or maybe they're afraid. If they're afraid, all I ask from our politicians is to stand up and stand behind what you believe. Don't be swayed by promises or threats. That shouldn't come into play when you're governing this country, when you represent people like me and you. They should be doing the right thing, not the easiest thing, not the most expeditious thing for them. Unfortunately, we can't count on politicians to do the right thing. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. Hope you have a great day. We'll see what happens with Jim Jordan today. Does it end up being multiple votes? Does he get to be Speaker of the House? Or does this shit show continue with no kind of rudder to our House of Representatives? We'll see what happens. And of course, we'll talk more about it on TikTok and on the podcast tomorrow. But I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you tomorrow.